There's a moment most of us have lived through. Boy, girl, gay, straight, somewhere in between. Picture it. You're somewhere around the ages of, let's say, 11 to 14. Your voice is still figuring itself out. Your confidence is fragile at best. Your social survival depends entirely on what other kids think of you. And there's someone you like. Not casually, not abstractly, in that full body, stomach and knots, heart pounding, if they like me back, my life will be amazing kind of way, right? You know what I'm talking about. Maybe you pass the note. Maybe your friend tells them. Maybe you're brave enough to tell them yourself. And then they laugh. Or their friends laugh. Or they say, "Aw, you're sweet." Or "You're so cute." Or maybe they don't even reject you vocally. They just look at you with that particular expression. The one that wasn't mean per se, just pity, which was somehow worse. And the room shifts. Your face burns. Your stomach drops. In that moment, something shifts in you that you don't have a name for. Now, you didn't call it, "My nervous system is now associating vulnerability with public humiliation." No, of course not. You were 13. You just called it embarrassing. You called it never fucking doing that again. And here's what I want to gently blow the lid off of today. Never doing that again might have been the most consequential decision that your 13-year-old self ever made, because that decision has been quietly running the show ever since. Today we're talking about why those early experiences with rejection and humiliation don't just sting in the moment. They become the architecture your nervous system builds around in every future attempt at connection. You're listening to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns. We'll be right back. Throw out the rules, forget the cliches. This isn't about the perfect profile or the perfect date. It's about real connection. It's time to strip away the masks, shed the stories, and drop those old patterns that no longer serve you. Tired of dating advice that doesn't fit? So are we. Welcome to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns, where conscious dating isn't about following a script. It's about embracing your whole self and attracting the kind of love that sets your soul on fire. I'm Rachel J., the connection coach and your host. Let's get real. If you've been with me for the last couple of episodes, then you know that we've been talking about those early feelings of fireworks, butterflies, chemistry, versus the lack thereof. We talked about how pop culture, movies, TV, reality dating shows, has trained us to chase intensity and mistake it for love. We talked about how your nervous system equates the spike of activation with chemistry, and how calm can feel boring when chaos is what you're calibrated to. And I even invited my husband to join me last week for a special conversation to get his take on that same dynamic. So today we're asking the deeper question. Where did that bracing start? Because your nervous system didn't decide on its own that vulnerability was dangerous. It learned that. It learned that from something that happened, usually early, usually in a moment that felt enormous at the time, and that never quite got processed. Today, I want to go one layer deeper. Because most people think that they chase fireworks because of movies, or dating culture, or attachment style. And yes, those all play a role, as we've discussed. But for many people, the real origin story is much earlier, much smaller, and much more personal. Because long before you were swiping on apps, your nervous system was learning the cost of vulnerability. So I want to give you some more pop culture references to anchor this, because while I previously shared a few examples, we were actually taught to fear vulnerability even before we began developing our first crushes, back when we still thought that the opposite sex had cooties. Let's take Charlie Brown, for example. Decades of pining over the little red-haired girl, never able to approach her, always retreating at the last second, already anticipating the rejection before it happens. He has been making kids laugh and making adults quietly uncomfortable for almost a century because we recognize him. We've been him. That's the wound forming in real time. the moment that a kid learns that wanting something openly is its own kind of risk. And more recently, there's Arnold from Hey Arnold, constantly reaching toward a girl who publicly mocks and dismisses him. And as it turns out, Helga is completely obsessed with him in private, but she just learned to armor it. Two kids, both wounded, both protecting themselves in opposite directions. One by reaching anyway, one by performing cruelty to hide the longing. These are childhood examples, and that's intentional because most of us grew up watching at least one of these shows, among others. And that's where it starts, before we're old enough to name it or process it or talk to a therapist about it. But then we grow up, and the patterns grow with us. And you know I love a good Friends reference, so I'm going there. Okay, now you know I love this show, and I've talked about Ross and Rachel before, but let's look at it through this lens today because it's kind of perfect. Ross carried a torch for Rachel for years before she ever saw him romantically. Years. He pined, he hoped, he nearly told her a dozen times, and then the moment would pass and he'd retreat. Sound familiar? That's Charlie Brown with a PhD. Ross had gotten so practiced at wanting Rachel from a safe distance that when she finally became available, when connection was actually possible, he didn't know how to just be in it. He sabotaged and he let his jealousy get in his own way. And then there's Chandler, who spent most seasons being completely emotionally unavailable. His whole personality was a deflection mechanism, a joke for every genuine moment, a quip when things got too real. And it's not a character flaw, it's a coping strategy. Chandler learned early that being seen was dangerous, and he became masterful at being entertaining instead. It took Monica, consistent, patient, genuinely safe Monica, who he already had an established connection with, to slowly dismantle that armor. And even then, it didn't go without a fight. And what I love about using Friends here is that these aren't cartoon kids anymore. These are grown-ass adults who are educated, funny, and somewhat self-aware, and they're still running the same protective patterns they developed long before we meet them in their 20s. That's the point. The wall doesn't come down just because you get older. It comes down when you do the work. And what I want you to notice about all of these characters, whether it's Charlie Brown, Arnold, Ross, or Chandler, none of them started out guarded. They were open ones, hopeful, soft. And then something happened and they built a wall. That wall didn't come out of nowhere. The wall was a response to a moment or a series of moments where being open cost them something. And your wall works the same way. Here's what I want you to understand about how your body works. Your nervous system is a survival machine, and its whole job is to keep you safe. And one of the ways it does that is by pattern matching, cataloging experiences and using them to predict future danger. So when you were 13 and you gathered every ounce of courage that you had and you were vulnerable and it went badly, your nervous system recorded that. It made an imprint, a neural pathway that said vulnerability equals humiliation. Humiliation equals danger. Danger equals fuck this, avoid at all costs. I'm not saying it this way to be dramatic. That's just how nervous systems work. But the thing is, that imprint doesn't expire. That pathway grows deeper the more times the program runs. You don't turn 25 or 35 or 42 and have your body automatically update the file. Unless you do the work to consciously update it, your nervous system is still running the same operating system it was running in middle school, and it responds accordingly. So when you meet someone that you're genuinely drawn to and you feel that pull toward openness, toward letting them in, you might think you're feeling butterflies. But remember what we talked about over the last 2 weeks. Butterflies feel the same in your body as anxiety. The only thing that differentiates the two is the meaning that you attach to that feeling. And that's where it can get confusing. What you think is butterflies or fireworks may actually be that deep nervous system familiarity pulling you toward a dynamic that you already know, which can send you directly down the path of the toxic patterns we unpacked the last 2 weeks. So listen to what your body is telling you, because what you might be interpreting as butterflies might actually be your body sensing a pattern that it recognizes, not necessarily a person who's right for you. That distinction changes everything. Here's how it plays out. Some of you learn to play it cool. Never show your hand first, make them come to you. Be unavailable enough that rejection becomes impossible because you never actually showed up to be rejected. Ross did this for years, right? He wanted Rachel, had all the feelings, and kept finding reasons why this wasn't the right moment. The right moment is often just a really convincing avoidance strategy. Some of you learn to become the funny one, the deflector, the one who makes a joke before anyone can get close enough to see the real thing. We just talked about Chandler, but I want you to sit with that a little longer because that pattern is everywhere. Humor as armor is one of the most socially rewarded coping mechanisms that exists, which is exactly what makes it so hard to spot and so hard to put down. Remember when Phoebe's creepy boyfriend, Roger the therapist, called out Chandler's humor as textbook, and he said, "I'd hate to be there when the laughter stops." Remember? That line hit differently because it was true, sadly, in the show, and ultimately echoed in Matthew Perry's real life, which still really fucking breaks my heart, but we can't go there right now. So let's move on. Some of you became the achiever, thinking if I'm impressive enough, successful enough, attractive, or fit enough, then I'm untouchable. The rejection can't reach me if I'm already elevated. It keeps you in motion, always building, always performing, always one more accomplishment away from feeling like enough. And some of you learn to chase the unavailable ones. Hello, hand raised here. Because if they're already a little out of reach, then the rejection feels like validation that you're unlovable, undesirable, unworthy of partnership. It becomes evidence that you keep putting yourself out there and getting burned. So what's the point? There's nobody out there for me. These are all incredibly intelligent adaptations. They worked. But now they're running your adult love life like software that hasn't been updated in 20 years. Here's where it all connects. Hey, quick question. What did dating actually cost you last month? And I don't just mean the dinners and the apps and the Ubers, though add those up and you're already looking at close to $1,000. I'm talking about the conversations that went nowhere. The dates you knew halfway through were not for you, but you stuck it out anyway. The quiet emotional hangover the next morning that you'd never admit to anyone. If you're a high performer, every month that you spend stuck in the same dating loop isn't just frustrating, it's financially irrational. And here's the thing, you're not broken and you're not unlovable. You just haven't had the tools to break the patterns that are keeping you in these frustrating loops. Until now. I'm Rachel J., the Connection Coach. I built Magnetic for the man who has his external life handled, but feels that person to share it with is still missing. This is a 6-week, private, self-guided transformation system that works from the inside out to change who you attract and how deep you go. No scripts, no pickup lines, just real, systemic change on your own schedule. Enrollment is limited to just 10 spots per round. Join the waitlist now and be first in when the next round opens. Go to theconnectioncoachonline.kit.com/magnet and get ready to change dating forever. 1 year from now, you're either going to be $20,000 deeper into the same draining loop, or you'll be waking up next to the love of your life. Stop the bleed. Secure your spot on the waitlist at theconnectioncoachonline.kit.com/magnet. The loop ends when you decide to break it. What are you waiting for? Go get on that list and I'll see you inside. A couple weeks ago, we talked about how the nervous system can mistake activation for attraction. How that hot and cold, push and pull, will they, won't they dynamic creates a dopamine spike that your body interprets as chemistry. But let's go one layer deeper today. Why does the unpredictable person feel electric? It's not just because of the dopamine. It's because chasing them keeps you in motion. And when you're in motion, when you're pursuing, analyzing, hoping, bracing, you never have to arrive. Arriving is the vulnerable part. Arriving means I'm here, I want this, I'm showing you that I want this. And your 13-year-old self knows exactly what can happen when you do that. So the nervous system has developed a genius workaround. It makes you fall for people who will never fully let you in. Because when you're always in pursuit, then vulnerability is always deferred. And the person who's steady, who's available, who actually wants you back clearly and consistently, the kind, hot, fun Coca-Cola vendor who took you to meet his grandma on the first date. God, I'm just so glad that I had this misstep in my own life, because it's become a really visceral example for me to refer to time and time again to help you. Anyway, that person fucking terrifies you. Not because they're wrong for you, but because with them, there's nowhere to hide. With them, you'd have to arrive. And arriving means being seen. And being seen means risking the thing that your nervous system has been protecting you from for 2 decades. That's why calm feels boring. It's not boring, it's just unarmored. If you really sit with this, you can probably trace it. Not to your last relationship, not to your ex, not even to your first adult heartbreak, but to something much earlier. A cafeteria moment, or a bus ride, or a hallway conversation, or maybe even a school dance. Some moment where your young nervous system learned, don't show everything, don't go first, don't feel too much, you got to protect yourself. And the wild thing is, most of us never consciously revisit that moment, but our bodies never forget it. And revisiting that moment is actually the key to unlocking new outcomes. I want to try something with you for a moment. Take a deep breath, close your eyes, and think back. You don't have to go all the way to middle school if another memory comes up first. But think about the first time that you were genuinely open with someone you had feelings for and it went badly. The first time that vulnerability cost you something. Sit with that for just a moment and notice what happens in your body as you recall it. Does your chest feel tight? Is your jaw clenching? Is there a flash of something hot or a shutdown or a kind of preemptive bracing? Maybe your fists clench? That response isn't weakness. That is your nervous system doing its job, still protecting the version of you who got hurt that day. But here's the real question. Is that protection still serving you? Because that 13-year-old needed it. You needed it then. But you're not 13 anymore. And the person in front of you now is not the one who laughed that day. The wall kept you safe, but the wall is also keeping out everything that you actually want. So what do we do with this? The first thing, and I mean the very first thing, is awareness. Because you cannot update a pattern that you haven't named. That's why revisiting some of these moments we'd just rather not are the key. Most people have never connected the dots between that formative humiliation and their current inability to show up openly in love. So if this episode did nothing else but hand you that connection, if you're sitting there thinking, oh, that's why I do that, then we've done something real today. The second thing is compassion. Not excuse making, but genuine compassion for the version of you who learned to protect yourself. That adaptation made sense and it was smart and it kept you in the game. You don't need to be angry at yourself for building the wall that kept you safe. You need to understand why it went up so that you can choose consciously when to open the door. And the third thing, the real work, is updating the nervous system's data. Not by forcing yourself to be vulnerable before you're ready, not by white-knuckling your way through the fear, but by slowly, carefully, intentionally creating a new program to run in the background, allowing for new experiences that reinforce your new upgraded neural pathways. The new pathways that say openness doesn't always end in humiliation, that safety is possible, that you can arrive and be met. That is the work. And it is work. It doesn't happen from a podcast episode alone, but it can start here. If any part of this episode landed somewhere specific, somewhere that feels less like theory and more like recognition, I want you to know that that's not coincidence. That recognition is the beginning. The work that I do privately and also inside the Magnetism Mastery System is designed for exactly this. It's not about tactics. It's not about how to text or what to say on a first date. It's about this, the underneath stuff that is actually going to change your outcomes, the patterns that are running the show without your permission. The Magnetism Mastery System is a structured, embodied framework for men who are done repeating the same cycles, for men who are ready to stop chasing unavailable connections and start actually understanding the nervous system patterns underneath attraction, communication, and emotional safety, and then rewiring them in a grounded, practical, compounding process. Founding membership is currently closed, but the waitlist is open, and waitlist members get first access and founding member pricing when the next round opens. You can join the waitlist by clicking the link in the show notes. Your future self will thank you. And if you got something from this episode today, if it shifted something, clarified something, named something that you've been maybe carrying without words, share it. Send it to the guy in your life who needs to hear it. That's how this work spreads. Subscribe if you haven't, leave a review if you're willing. It genuinely helps this show reach the people who need it. Now just take a breath. Notice your body. And remember, you are not the 13-year-old who got laughed at. You are someone who chose to come here today to look at this honestly and to consider something different. That's not small. That's the whole thing. Until next time, you're listening to Stripped, Drop Your Patterns with me, the Connection Coach, Rachel J. Bye for now.